Welcome back to r/JustKnowHOA. In today's Reddit story, imagine an HOA Karen calling 911 to shut down your wedding day right as you are about to say, I do. She thought she had me cornered with her clipboard and threats, but when I said those 4 magic words, this is my private property, everything changed. What happened next? Let's just say Karen picked the wrong wedding to mess with. And the first r/HOA Reddit story is titled, HOA Karen called 911 to ruin my lake wedding, but I own the property. So for context, I own a small lakefront house that used to be my grandparents' place. It's on a little peninsula with a shallow cove on one side and open water on the other. The house predates the subdivision next door by decades. When the developer built the subdivision, they wrapped around the back of my parcel and formed an HOA. My driveway crosses their road by recorded easement. My land, including the strip to the water, is 100% not subject to their CC&Rs. My deed literally says, not part of subdivision name, and references the easement language the developer recorded when they needed my grandparents' sign-off. Over the years, the HOA folks still acted like the lake is their private backdrop though. Most of them were fine, one of them was not. Enter the HOA Karen. She was on the board and introduced herself the first week I moved in full-time. She came over with a clipboard like she was delivering a package. She did not wave, did not ask my name. She said, "We liked things tidy on this road. Your trailer needs to be screened and boats cannot be stored inside." I told her that I was not in the HOA, and she said, "Everyone who uses our roads follows our rules." When I pointed out the recorded easement, she said, "We will see." Well, that was the start. Over the next year, she tried everything. She left friendly reminders that looked like citations on my mailbox. She emailed me design guidelines with notes on allowable paint colors after seeing me buy stain at the hardware store. And CC'd the whole board. She stood at the corner with her phone anytime I had contractors, filming the minivans like they were cartel trucks. I ignored most of it and responded with links to the deed and easement doc when she demanded something. Every time she would back off just a hair and come back with a different angle. When my partner and I got engaged, we decided to have the ceremony in our yard by the lake. We did not want a big ballroom wedding, we wanted a simple one, chairs on the lawn, a little arch, a barbecue caterer, a Bluetooth speaker for music, some string lights, a tent in case of rain, and our dog wearing a bow tie. Because I live in a place where people argue about whether the county sheriff counts decibels with a A weighting or C weighting, not joking, I did my homework. I called the county zoning office and confirmed 2 things. Number 1, private events under a certain head count on private property did not need a special event permit unless we were closing a public road or bringing in a stage or alcohol sales. And number 2, the noise ordinance said plainly audible across property lines and had a decibel limit after a certain hour. However, the cutoff was late enough that we would be fine. We planned for music to stop well before quiet hours anyway. I also called the sanitation company and rented enough porta potties for our guest count, so no one had to walk into the house. I got a 1-day event insurance through our homeowner's carrier because I'm not stupid. I emailed my neighbors, the reasonable ones, a week ahead with a friendly note saying, "We will have about X amount of guests, parking is on my lawn and the side field, and we will stop the amplified music by X o'clock. Please text me if anything is off." I did not email the HOA board because, well, they are not my neighbors. They are a corporate entity that exists to tell people which shade of beige is allowed, and I guess to extort homeowners. And 5 days before the wedding, this HOA Karen sent an email titled, "Event approval needed," to me and the board, and she wrote, "Per architectural review, any gathering of more than 20 vehicles using our private road requires prior board approval. Please provide guest list, vendor list, insurance proof, proposed parking diagram, and music plan. Also, no amplified music is allowed lakeside." She attached their CC&Rs. I replied with just 1 sentence. "I'm not a member of your HOA, and my event is on my property. Your CC&Rs do not apply." I attached a PDF of my deed, the survey with the subdivision boundary, and the recorded easement with the little index book and page number, and I also attached a county email confirming no permit required. I kept it short. All vendors will use my easement, all parking is on my parcel, and the noise ordinance will be followed. She replied, "We will be monitoring and will call the sheriff if there are violations." I said, "Please feel free to call the sheriff if you witness anything illegal." And that was that. I thought it was over, but I underestimated how bored a person with a clipboard can be. Now onto the wedding day. The weather was perfect. It was one of those shimmering lake afternoons with just enough breeze to keep bugs down. My partner looked like a human Pinterest board in the best way. Our families were actually getting along, and the dog's bow tie stayed on, and the barbecue food smelled like happiness. We had vendors arriving all morning, tent crew, caterer, photographer, and so on. About an hour before the ceremony, the tent crew leader knocked on my door and said, "There's a lady out there blocking the road with a golf cart." My easement cuts across a short stretch of the HOA road before it turns into my driveway, so I walked up. There she was, parked sideways with a lawn chair next to the cart, clipboard out. She said something like, "No trucks today, we didn't approve your event. Our road cannot handle heavy vehicles." I pointed to the easement stake at the corner where my driveway meets the asphalt. The easement language says, "Ingress and egress for all usual and customary purposes, including construction." I told her the tent crew had lighter trucks than a garbage truck, which uses the road every week, but she said, "The board voted no." I told her the board could vote to build the spaceship and it still would not make Mars part of their subdivision. She didn't move. I called the sheriff's non-emergency line and explained someone was blocking my recorded easement on my wedding day. They sent a deputy. She showed up quickly, probably because he could see a fight brewing and it would be an easy call. He listened to both of us and she told him that I was throwing a commercial event on our common lake and refusing to follow rules. I told him it was my wedding on my deeded parcel, not in the HOA. I pulled out a folder like I was doing a science fair project with the deed survey, easement, county email about permits, insurance, vendor contracts, and so on. I said, "We will keep volume under the ordinance. Cars will be on my grass and field. Porta potties are placed per the county document. Also, we are not closing any public roads. This is my private property." Karen started to argue again and then actually froze. I don't mean physically couldn't move, I mean she got that look like her brain blue-screened. She had been bluffing the whole time, and having a uniform look at a stamped deed did something to her posture. The deputy told her very calmly that a recorded easement is a real thing and that blocking one is not allowed. He asked her to move her cart. She huffed, muttered something about "lawsuit incoming," and left. The deputy looked at me and honestly was polite. He said, "Congratulations, by the way. I have to say this for the record. Keep your guests and vendors on your property and your easement. Don't block the road and don't use HOA common areas. Keep the sound within ordinance, and if anyone crosses property lines, it turns into a civil problem. I don't want a referee." I said, "Absolutely. We will keep everyone on my side." Well, that line, "keep everyone on your property," is where the malicious compliance starts. See, for years the HOA folks had been using a narrow footpath right across the very edge of my land to get to what they call their community beach. It's not an exotic Caribbean thing, it's 20 feet of rocky shoreline where they set kayaks. The subdivision plat shows their property line. Their so-called beach was half on their side and half on mine. When the lake is down, their dog pilings are planted in lakebed that my surveyor told me I have some rights to use. I had not made it a fight because life is short and I'm not trying to be the villain of someone's neighborhood Facebook group. People walked the footpath and waved whatever, but if a deputy tells me to keep everyone on my property, I can do that. And if Karen threatens to call 911 anytime someone's shoe hits HOA soil, I can truly lean into that too. So I walked back down to the yard, grabbed the tent crew and my cousin who's in construction and said, "We're going to put up some temporary fencing on the property line to keep our guests from accidentally wandering." I had the boundaries staked from when I measured for the tent. I keep a roll of that bright orange construction fence with T-posts because I've had contractors before. We strung that fence right along the survey line from the driveway to the water, including the across the footpath cut everyone uses. We zip-tied "private event, private property" signs every 20 feet. We also set a line of little buoys with thin rope in the shallow water along the extension of the property line because the surveyor had shown me the bearing to the ordinary high water mark. Was it petty? Maybe. Was it exactly what the deputy told me to do? Keep everyone on my property? Yes. Did it follow the letter of the county's advice and make it crystal clear that no one from my wedding would be accused of using HOA common areas? Also yes. Did it cut off the HOA's shortcut to their so-called beach and dock? You bet. While we were doing that, the caterer showed me where they planned to stage the smoke trailer and the generator. The proposed spot was fine, but I moved it 10 feet so that both sat just inside my property line and faced the HOA's clubhouse across the road. Before you call me evil, the generator was a quiet inverter unit with a baffle, and the smoker was legal and permitted. We were not smoking during the ceremony anyway. I placed them there because Karen had emailed, "No vendors may stage on our road," and the sheriff said, "Keep everything on your property." I wanted a deputy or a judge, if it came to it, to look at photos and say, yep, everything was on OP's land, we did the ceremony, and it was perfect in the ways that matter. My partner cried a little, I cried a little, our friends cheered, and the dog decided at the worst possible time to shake himself dry right next to my pants. The speaker worked though, the breeze was kind, and the barbecue tasted like a hug. We took photos by the water. My aunt, who lives to find faults in any gathering, declared it tasteful, which is the highest possible grade that she gives. Then came the part where Karen tried her biggest move. She had not forgotten her promise to call the sheriff. About a half hour into the reception, a second patrol car rolled up with lights. You could tell that he was arriving to a noise complaint because they leave the sirens off but do the lights as a social signal. He walked into the yard, found me, looked at the construction fence, looked at the boys, looked at the speaker on a stand, pointed towards my house and asked, "Who's the property owner?" I said, "I am." Behind him I could see Karen at the corner, pointing like a stage mom. She had a printout of the CC&Rs and I swear a decibel meter app on her phone. He said that there had been a complaint of amplified music on HOA common areas and so-called trespass. I pointed to the fence, I pointed to the speaker, I showed him the county email. I said, "We are on my parcel. We place physical barriers so my guests don't set foot on their common areas. Also, we are under the decibel limit. We plan to stop music well before quiet hours. The deputy earlier told me to keep everyone on my property." And that is exactly what I'm doing. He asked if he could walk the line. I walked with him. He looked at the survey stakes in the fence and he saw that the footpath was blocked and that the HOA beach was, awkwardly for them, partly inside my fence line. He saw their dock piling and how my boys lined up with the bearing. I had a printout, and he also saw on their side a cluster of HOA residents with kayaks looking confused because their path was blocked. But that was not my problem. The deputy looked at me and said, "Looks like you did your homework." He walked over to Karen and told her, loud enough for people to hear, "Ma'am, this is a civil matter. They are on their property. They have a right to put up a temporary barrier to keep their guests on their property. Loudness is also within ordinance. If you don't want their guests crossing your common area, they have solved that for you already." She started to sputter about blocking access and beach rights, and he told her that if the HOA believed it had an easement across my land, they could produce the recorded instrument. If there wasn't one, then there wasn't one, and using a path out of habit is not the same as having a right to it. He walked back to me and said, "Just keep it inside the fence and keep the road clear. Also, enjoy your evening." And we did. Somehow, Karen tried to shut us down and the deputy told her to buzz off made the party even better. People smiled bigger, the ribs tasted smokier, and the lake looked prettier. The band, okay, a speaker at a playlist, played a little quieter out of respect, but the vibes were up. Every time I glanced towards the road, I could see HOA people standing on their side like kids locked out of a treehouse they thought were theirs. Now here's where the compliance went from petty fence to actual consequences though. Remember how I said their dock pilings were in the lake bed that my surveyor said falls within my riparian rights? I had never cared because it was not harming anyone, and docks are docks, but when Karen decided to wage war on my wedding day, I decided later to make sure all advice given in uniform was followed to the letter and documented. After the second deputy's visit, I took photos, my fence line, my boys, their dock, their kayakers stranded on their side, their HOA clubhouse patio where they had their own little cocktails on the lake sign up. I also pulled out a folder from my house that I hadn't planned to touch that day, my correspondence with the county shoreline management office. A month earlier, when I was measuring for the tent, I had emailed the shoreline office to ask where the ordinary high water mark was for purposes of temporary event stakes, and I included my survey. The shoreline officer responded with a map and a note saying, "Dock structures require permits and must be located within the riparian area associated with the upland parcel." At the time, I had ignored the part about dogs because I was not looking to be that guy. However, after the wedding, once we had cleaned up and sent grandparents home with leftover coleslaw, I sent a polite email reply to the shoreline officer thanking them for their earlier guidance and attaching the photos from that day. The body was short and non-accusatory. Thanks again for your help in identifying the high water mark for my temporary tent. Also, just for my own understanding, could you confirm whether the dog pictured here appears to be within the riparian area of the parcel to which it is attached? Because my survey suggests the pilings are not completely within that parcel's projected shoreline sites. I just want to ensure I'm compliant on my side. I copied the HOA's generic email address because I'm generous like that. 3 days later, the shoreline office replied, "They don't move fast unless you hand them a checklist of issues." The reply said, "Thanks for your inquiry. Based on the survey you provided in our GIS overlays, the dog pilings shown encroach outside the riparian area of the lot number, and our records don't reflect an active dog permit for that structure. We will open a case and coordinate with the property owner and HOA to resolve it." They CC'd the code enforcement department. I did not attach confetti to my reply, but I really wanted to. The next 2 weeks were a lesson in cause and effect. The county inspector came out, walked the shoreline with a wheel and a clipboard, the good kind, and knocked on my door to ask if I'd be willing to show them where my survey stakes were. And I did. They took photos, then they went to the HOA clubhouse and took even more photos. And later that week, I saw a poster posted on the HOA's notice board saying, "Notice of violation, unpermitted shoreline structure." The inspector also noted publicly that the HOA had built a small shed near the beach for paddles and life jackets without a permit, and that shed sat partly on my land by about 3 feet. It had been there so long that no one thought to check. Apparently, when you poke the county bear with pictures and maps, the bear wakes up and starts reading everything. The notice required the HOA to either remove the dock or apply for a permit and reconfigure it to fit within their riparian area, and to remove the shed or obtain an easement from the adjacent property owner, which was me, with compensation and recording. The letter also mentioned potential daily fines for non-compliance. Under the county code, I would have been fine granting them a tiny easement for the shed for a token dollar if they had not tried to ruin my wedding. However, after the wedding day, I was very interested in following rules to the letter. So the HOA emailed me, finally polite, asking if I would consider a so-called boundary line adjustment or an easement for the shed. I told them I would consider a license, revocable permission, for a limited time while they moved their stuff, not an easement though, and I would not consider any adjustment. They said the shed had stood without issue for years. I sent back the deputy's words, "Keep your guests and belongings on your property." I also included a screenshot of their own CC&Rs which say, "No structure shall encroach upon adjacent properties." If they wanted to be rule people, we could be rule people. They tried to argue that the footpath across my land was a so-called prescriptive easement because they had used it for years, but that's a fun term people learn on TV and then use it wrong. Prescriptive easements are ugly, expensive, and not automatic. You don't get one because you've been annoying for a while. You usually need open, notorious, continuous, hostile use for the full statutory period without permission, and then you still have to go to court and win. These were neighbors with kayaks, not a landlocked ranch. Also, my grandparents had allowed lake people to walk there as a courtesy. Permission kills hostile use. If they wanted to go there, I was ready to produce 3 old handwritten notes from my grandpa telling the previous HOA president to please ask folks to stick to your side when the kids are fishing. The bottom line is they had no recorded right and their own rules sank them even deeper. Meanwhile, while the county stuff was brewing, there was HOA drama. People talk. A neighbor who's just a human and not a board member told my partner that the wedding night had turned into a Facebook brawl in the neighbors group. Half the comments were, "Why did they fence the path?" And "We couldn't get to the beach at sunset." And "Who do they think they are?" The other half were saying, "It is their property. Karen should not have tried to shut down someone's wedding. And we are looking like idiots." Apparently, someone posted a screenshot of the deputy's comment about easements and a photo of the so-called notice of violation, like it was neighborhood gossip gold. The HOA scheduled an emergency board meeting, but I didn't go because I like my blood pressure. Later, I was told through the grapevine, though, that it got spicy. Karen tried to double down and proposed that they assert beach rights in court, and another board member who's an actual lawyer told her that filing a claim you cannot win just to bully a neighbor neighbor is a good way to lose your D&O insurance. The lawyer neighbor also said out loud that the board exposed the HOA to fines by ignoring permits, and this all started because someone could not resist playing cop on a day that was not about her. And that quote made me a little giddy. A week after the emergency meeting, the HOA president, not Karen, emailed me a letter. On behalf of the board, congratulations on your marriage. We regret any interruptions that occurred. We would like to discuss resolving the shoreline compliance items with the county in a cooperative manner. He asked if I would allow county staff to access the side of my lot for measurements, and I said yes because I'm not a monster and also because I wanted everything documented in triplicate. The county came back with official orders. The dog had to be removed and reinstalled within the HOA's riparian lines if they wanted to keep it, and the HOA shed had to move entirely onto their site or be demolished. The footpath across my site? Not recognized. They could apply for an easement if I agreed, but I did not agree. They were fined daily starting on a certain date if they didn't start work. If they removed voluntarily and promptly, the fines would be suspended. Then came an email from the HOA's insurer, because it turns out when you have to move a dock and demo a shed, you want money. The insurer asked me to sign a temporary access agreement so contractors could come onto my parcel to dismantle and move the shed. They also asked if I had any claims related to interference with quiet enjoyment on the wedding day. That's a phrase I had not expected to see in an email with a logo. I did not plan a lawsuit because I'm not litigious. But I did have some costs that I wouldn't have had but for Karen's games, and I had receipts. I made a little list with dates and amounts, extra fencing and stakes, extra labor for my cousin and the tent crew to put it up fast, and a credit to the caterer for time lost at the gate because she blocked the road and they were billed by the hour. I added the rental of an extra small generator because I had moved things last minute and wanted redundancy. I attached the deputy's incident number. I really kept it factual. I wrote, I'm not seeking damages for stress on my wedding day. I'm seeking reimbursement for out-of-pocket costs incurred directly due to your insured's attempt to interfere with my event and the subsequent need to comply with law enforcement instruction to confine guests and vendors to my parcel. 2 weeks later, a check showed up from their insurer covering those items. It was not a life-changing amount, but it was enough for a nice weekend trip we took as a second mini-moon. It was also a piece of paper with their name on it that said, "We caused this." In total, the shed came down. It hurt them more than they expected because they had to hire someone to patch the ground, replant, and re-pour a little pad on their side that met setback rules. The dock was trickier though. They had to apply for a permit, hire a marine contractor, and pull the pilings. During that process, the county required that the dock be removed entirely for a while because of timing with fish spawning habitat, the lake has seasonal restrictions, and for most of the summer, the HOA had no dock. People had to carry kayaks to the water over their rocky site instead of the gentle slope on mine. Remember the board politics? Well, Karen didn't survive. After the fines and the check to me, the board held a recall vote. I did not attend, not my club, but a neighbor told me it passed easily. Sharon was removed from the board. I stopped seeing her golf cart parked like a checkpoint at the corner, but I did see a for sale by owner sign in her yard months later with an asking price that optimistically included lake access, which made me laugh out loud. And yes, Karen, you have lake access on your site. We are now on friendly terms with most of the HOA. The president apologized in person one afternoon. It was not performative, and he said, I should have shut that down before it started. You're not our problem. We made you our problem. I told him I appreciated the apology. I told him calmly that I put up the fence because a deputy told me to keep everyone on my property and because their board member had repeatedly threatened me with calls and fines. If they did not want fences, they shouldn't force situations that require fences. He nodded. And the next one is an absolutely amazing, satisfying, malicious compliance story that you don't want to miss. It is titled, Take You to Court? Okay. This was many years ago, so I apologize if some of the details are incorrect. It was the year of our Lord 2006. My big sister had just started driving on her own. My parents did as most parents did at the time. They bought her the biggest pile of crap car that they could find. Relatively reliable, but it was a mid-80s gold Geo Metro. It was a beater, rusty, dented and dinged, very ugly, and importantly for this story, one of the mirrors was duct taped on. One afternoon, in the fading light, she was driving to our local Pizza Hut to pick up her paycheck. On that fateful day, as the sun was going down, someone in a big black Suburban type of vehicle backed into her front driver's side pretty hard, so hard in fact that the car was completely totaled. But luckily, my sister was fine, both parties had insurance, and they called the police to take an official report, and my parents started the hunt for a new car. Some time passes and they get a letter from the Suburban's insurance agency asking for our insurance to cover the cost of the damage done to the Suburban. The Suburban driver was alleging that my sister had been speeding through the parking lot and was therefore at fault. This was news to them. They grilled my sister, who swore up and down and sideways that she was not speeding, and actually that she was going much slower than normal because as the sun was setting it was hitting the windshield in such a way that made visibility difficult. After some digging, they found in the police report the sheriff's deputy had noted that the mirror that was duct taped on fell straight down. So not only had my sister not been speeding, but she was very nearly or completely stopped at the time of the accident. My parents' insurance sent a letter back stating that my sister had not been at fault for this accident and that they were willing to accept the total they had paid for the car several months earlier, a paltry sum of $350. The lady who hit my sister responded back that she would not be paying for anything, as she was very confident that she was not at fault, and told my parents that they would just have to take her to small claims court. My parents responded, "Bet." And did just that. In order to get all of the paperwork in line for small claims court, they had to take this crappy little Geo Metro to an auto body shop and get an estimation for how much it would cost to replace the panels that this lady had totaled. Well, a car that old was difficult to find parts for, and so they were unable to find anything to replace the panels and the door. So they gave her a quote for how much it would be to repair those panels as well as replace the tire and suspension bits that she messed up by backing into it. About $4,000. Just before court, they did attempt to go to mediation with her to attempt to get her to just pay the $350 that they had initially bought the car for. Unfortunately, or fortunately, she was still convinced that she was not at fault. Long story short, my parents were awarded the full $4,000 as it was determined that the lady did not check behind her thoroughly enough before backing out of the parking spot. And that is how my parents made $3,000 on a $300 car. And because it was so nice, let's read another malicious compliance story that you don't want to miss because it is brand new. It is titled, "Manager insisted we do timesheets after hours." So at our work, timesheets have to be filled in every fortnight on a Friday by close of business to be processed first thing Monday morning. Our manager was a really chill woman who would sign off on timesheets Friday morning and then send them to payroll before 5 p.m. She went on leave because her daughter was having a baby and we got some young dude to temporarily fill in as a manager. As you might guess, this guy was a total D-bag. One of the things he did was insist that we complete timesheets only after we had worked our fortnightly hours. This meant we had to work until 5 and then get our timesheets signed and then get them to payroll. Except payroll closes at 5, which meant we couldn't get our timesheets to payroll until Monday morning and they would be processed late. So we decided we would take our time filings in timesheets. A lot of us hang around chatting on a Friday because there's a bar across the road that does cheap drinks until 6 or 7 p.m. So here's what we did. We would leisurely do our timesheets and douchebag manager would have to hang around to sign them all. One week we didn't give them to him until right before 6 p.m. and he was pissed, absolutely livid. This lasted about 6 weeks. I guess something got flagged down somewhere that our whole department was not getting paid on time. D-bag manager was quickly identified as the culprit and given the boot. They ended up getting one of my coworkers to take over until our real manager came back. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to not miss my daily videos and I will see you again tomorrow.